Welcome to OECD Podcast, where policy meets people.
Hi, I'm Shayne MacLachlan from the OECD, and today we're talking about the social economy and labelling. I mean, a lot of us around the world will head to the shops this Christmas and buy gifts, and we're particularly sensitive to the labels on different products. And I mean, the social economy is an important contributor to the broader economy. In OECD countries, estimates show that the social economy accounts for between 2 and 10% of national GDP. It employs at least 11 million people across the EU, which represents more than 6% of the employed population. It fosters socioeconomic inclusion of vulnerable groups and enhances community resilience. But not many consumers, businesses, and indeed policymakers, many listening today, can clearly and identify social economy products. So I'm joined today by Ruben Rebelo, who's a policy officer at the European Commission, and Sofija Rakcejeva, a policy analyst at the OECD, and we're going to talk about possible solutions to this issue by presenting the latest OECD European Commission publication on labels for the social economy. This report maps labels available to the social economy entities and provides guidance on how to effectively design, implement, and evaluate them. So let's go to our first question. Thanks so much for being here today with us, Ruben and Sofija. The social economy typically includes entities like associations, non-profits, cooperatives, mutual societies, foundations, and social enterprises that are driven by social objectives and putting people over capital. So in most cases, by democratic and participative governance. That sounds like quite a mouthful, but let's just boil it down. Why does this matter, Sofija?
Sure. We often interact with the social economy without really realizing it. We can live in a housing association, for example, or in a community land trust, eat organic food, buy glasses, or receive care from a cooperative, be insured by a mutual society, work and upskill in a work integration social enterprise, get funding from a cooperative bank, volunteer in our local association, or donate to a foundation with a cause close to our hearts. So even if some people are not familiar with the term social economy, the reality behind it is very concrete and very close to people.
Yeah, I love that idea of doing good and putting people over profit. Thanks, Sofija, for your take. Ruben, from your perspective at the European Commission, what can you add to what Sofija's already said?
Yeah, we see that the reality that Sofija just described actually really comes through in the numbers. Recently, the Commission published a special Eurobarometer on the social economy, the first of its kind. And the results show that more than half of Europeans have engaged with social economy organizations in the past 5 years. For example, as volunteers, donors, customers, and members. 3 out of 4 people also say that the social economy is important for the well-being of society in their country. So citizens see the value of the social economy. The challenge is making sure that these organizations are easy to spot and support.
Yeah, sounds great. Sofija, what other types of support can we provide to policymakers, I guess, in this challenge?
To help with this challenge, policymakers at different levels of government have recognized the importance of the social economy for a number of policy objectives such as social cohesion, employment, and resilience, and are implementing policies to support it. The OECD is helping them with this. For example, in 2022, it adopted the recommendation on the social and solidarity economy and social innovation that encourages countries to implement 9 building blocks that provide the conditions for the social economy to thrive at international, national, and local level.
So yeah, that idea of multi-level governance certainly important. But Ruben, from your perspective at the European Union and those different relationships and partners, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I would say that the EU is very closely aligned with the OECD on this topic. We also see the social economy as a key partner for employment, social inclusion, the green and digital transitions, and overall the competitiveness agenda. And similarly, in 2021, the Commission adopted the Social Economy Action Plan with 63 concrete actions to be rolled out by 2030. These cover things like legal frameworks for the social economy, state aid rules, taxation, access to markets and finance, etc. And as part of the Social Economy Action Plan, in 2023, the Council of the EU adopted a recommendation on developing social economy framework conditions. It gives member states guidance on how to adopt their public policies, legal frameworks, and institutions to support the social economy. And it also invites them to adopt or update national strategies to do so.
Thanks, Ruben. Sounds brilliant. despite the significant contribution of social economy organisations to our everyday lives and policy objectives, and then consumers, the firms, and policymakers, we struggle to spot these products. So this makes it more difficult for the social economy to access funding, I guess taxation measures, public procurement opportunities, or just to attract socially and environmentally conscious consumers. So labels can obviously help with that. At the same time, there are hundreds of labels out there. How can we cut through the noise to recognize social economy labels, Ruben?
Yes, indeed. I'd say that we're seeing a clear shift in what people and investors want. There's a growing demand for sustainable, inclusive, and community-centered goods, services, and financial products. And social economy organizations are often the ones that are providing these. In the Eurobarometer that I mentioned, almost all Europeans say they think businesses should follow social economy type values. This can be having a social or environmental goal, reinvesting most profits, and involving employees in decision-making. Labels overall can make these organizations easier to identify for everyone, be it policymakers, consumers, businesses, and investors, so that their support can be directed towards social economy organizations. In fact, both the OECD and the EU recommendations that have been mentioned highlight how important these labeling systems are. But in practice, it's quite the crowded space. There are hundreds of sustainability and impact labels. And just to give an example, the Eco-Label Index alone lists more than 450 eco-labels worldwide. So it's no surprise that people feel lost and struggle to know which labels they can trust and which ones actually relate to the social economy.
Thanks, Ruben. I mean, from the OECD perspective, Sofija, we have a guide that we published recently on labels for the social economy, don't we?
Yes, indeed. Our joint recent guide on labels for the social economy offers a path through this labels maze that Ruben just mentioned. It unpacks 4 groups of labels that can be useful for the social economy. The first one are labels that are exclusively available to social economy entities. These are the ones that lead policymakers, consumers, investors, and businesses directly to the social economy. They include public labels such as the ESUS accreditation in France and the Register for Social Enterprises in Denmark, and more bottom-up private initiatives such as Social Enterprise Code in the Netherlands or the People and Planet First verification available globally. What makes them stand out from other impact labels is the requirement to reinvest profit into the entity's social and/or environmental mission, which is one of the core principles of the social economy. Even though some of these labels grant access to funding, public procurement opportunities, and taxation, many eligible entities do not use them.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sofija. I mean, that's the first category of labels. Ruben, what's the second group?
Yes, well, the second group are broader impact labels that social economy organizations can also use, but which are open to many other entities too. These include things like the B Corp certification or the EU Eco-Label. They can be useful for social economy organizations because they help them reach out to more customers or attract employees who care about impact. However, it's important to note that these are not designed to identify the social economy as such. They don't usually require reinvestment of profits or an asset log, which are important elements of the social economy. So they are helpful for visibility, but they are not a shortcut for policymakers or consumers who really want to identify social economy entities.
Yeah, brilliant. Maybe, Sofija, you can outline the third and the fourth group of labels that exist.
So yes, the third group of labels that can cut the time spent in this maze, particularly for savers and financial institutions, are financial labels that point to products or entities financing the social economy. They include labels such as Finansol in France and the European Code of Good Conduct for Microcredit Provision, available across Europe. And the last labels group, briefly touched upon in the report, are the so-called implicit labels. They're not labels as such, and they're not as bright or loud in the labels world as the others, but can quietly signal to stakeholders that entities meet some quality standards. For example, belonging to networks or receiving funding from a well-known investor can identify some social economy entities and put them on the map.
Yeah, so that's great. Thanks. I mean, we're getting a real sense of the importance of labels and how labels can, in fact, help social economy entities to reach policymakers, but not only, they can also reach consumers, businesses, and financiers. Now, there are rising and growing continual concerns about the green or impact washing and those elements. So how can we tell the good from the greenwashed, Ruben, in your words?
Green or impact washing is definitely a risk, but I think we can say that a credible label has three things usually. First, a clear and measurable standard. Second, an independent assessment of whether organizations meet that standard. And third, a public register who is actually labeled. The more transparent the label is about this, the better. But we know that most consumers don't have the time to dig into the small print of every label they see on a product. Some labels can be vague or even misleading, and that's why regulation matters. The EU directive on empowering consumers for the green transition, for example, requires that any private sustainability label must be based on third-party verification of compliance with publicly available standards. The idea is to protect consumers and make it harder for greenwashing or impact washing to slip through.
Yeah, and then I guess on the flip side, there's all the heavy paperwork, isn't there? The assessments and reports that come with these labels, and smaller local social economy entities are often the ones who'd benefit the most from that extra visibility. But they're also the ones who usually don't have the time, staff capacity, or know-how to deal with the long application forms and assessments and so on. So, Ruben, how can local managers make that process easier for them?
Indeed, I think this is something that comes up a lot in our conversations with social economy organizations. There are three big levers that can help make labels more accessible. The first one is keeping things clear. Standards and application forms should be as straightforward as possible and written in plain language so that organizations don't lose hours just trying to understand what's being asked of them. Second, building capacity is very important. Label managers can offer training, guidance materials, or even one-to-one support to help organizations through the process. In some cases, they can even fund part of the work needed to meet these standards. And third, we need to make sure that labels bring real benefits. If organizations invest time and resources to get labeled, they should clearly see what they gain, be it access to funding, markets, tax measures, or visibility. A concrete example is the European Code of Good Conduct for Microcredit Provision. This code sets standards for microfinance providers in Europe. There are clear provider guidelines that explain what happens before, during, and after the assessment. And microfinance institutions can get technical assistance via the InvestEU Advisory Hub to help them apply the code. And crucially, complying with the code is a prerequisite to access EU funding under the InvestEU Social Investment and Skills window and the financial instruments under DSF plus Easy Strand. So yes, there is an effort, but there is also a strong payoff.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. I mean, you mentioned that the uptake of specific labels for the social economy is quite low. I guess the administrative burden associated with them plays an important role, but so does the limited awareness, education, as it were, among stakeholders. So how can label managers put their label on the map, Sofija?
Labels indeed need to reach their users to have a real impact, and communication is key. It can be done through networks, communities of labeled entities, or information campaigns. For example, the Global People and Planet First verification has an interesting promotion and assessment structure that builds on a network of networks. The label partners are split into three groups. First, promotion partners advertise their verification to their members, but do not participate in the review process. Second, single badge partners review documents from their network members who wish to have the label. Third, double badge partners manage an existing label that meets or surpasses the verification standards and can offer the People and Planet First badge without requiring a document review. This model kills two birds with one stone. Networks apply the badge's principles to the local context while verifying compliance with the standards, while network members learn about the badge and benefit from the global visibility that it brings. Another example of an interesting communication campaign is the ESUS tour run by the Movement of Ecological, Social and Solidarity Enterprises in France. The campaign organizes events across France to promote the ESUS label among around 800 social economy stakeholders, including social economy entities, experts, financial players, entrepreneurs, public institutions, and elected officials. And lastly, as consumers, all of us can probably say that an easily recognizable, simple logo makes the labeled product or entity stand out.
Yeah, so as a comms person, I can definitely relate to the power of simplicity in visual elements. So let's move on to the last question on OECD Podcast today, talking about labels and the social economy. I mean, we do, whether we like it or not, live in a world where priorities can shift, and there's lots of response to these evolving realities like aging, climate change, obviously the digital transition and innovation, plus more recently, pretty big and concerning security issues. But labels for the social economy have to be relevant, don't they, Sofija?
They can remain relevant as long as stakeholders find them useful. Evaluation can help with that through showing if, why, and when some aspects of the label should be changed. The first step of evaluation is deciding on the questions to be asked. It is usually helpful to know 4 things. First, are the label criteria still aligned with stakeholder requirements? Second, is their verification of compliance with criteria clear, transparent, and efficient? Third, do the benefits of the labels make it worthwhile for entities to go through the assessment process? And fourth, does the label reach everyone it needs to reach? The second step is collecting data to answer these questions. Label registers usually have quantitative data that can be analyzed, such as the number of labeled entities, as well as their sectors and places of activity. And then to complement this quantitative analysis, stakeholder consultations can explain these quantitative trends. For example, the Danish Business Authority conducted interviews with a number of stakeholders to evaluate the 2014 Act on Registered Social Enterprises. These stakeholders included social enterprises that had chosen to register, and interestingly, those that preferred not to do so, researchers, employer and employee organizations, and municipalities. Finally, action needs to be taken if the evaluation results show the need for change. This can include things like changing the standards, the assessment process, or the incentives tied to the label. And then, of course, as any change, this kind of change needs to be managed transparently to make the transition smooth. Publicly available and accessible information on what, why, and when is changing, for example, through a frequently asked questions page on the label's website, can bring the stakeholders on board and avoid confusion.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we're just understanding, as it were, the importance of action in this space. Ruben, I mean, in terms of the right environment and conditions, do you want to talk about that? I mean, the recent OECD European Commission report shows that labels work best when they're backed up by the right environment, don't they?
When we talk about the right environment, we're talking about strong incentives and complementary measures. This means clear legal frameworks, social and green public procurement, business support, dedicated funding, and tax measures. So these are just some examples on how we can build such an environment. When these pieces are in place, labels become a gateway to real opportunities for social economy organizations. In the end, we're talking about the kind of economy people want. In the Eurobarometer that I mentioned in the beginning, 88% of Europeans say that public authorities should develop strategies and legislation to support social economy organizations, and 80% support direct public funding to the social economy. This proves that there is a clear mandate from citizens. And labels, if they are well designed and well implemented, can be one of the main tools that help turn that mandate into our everyday reality.
Thanks, Ruben, and thanks, Sofija. Of course, today's been really educational and informative. I hope you've learned heaps from this, as have I. I mean, if you want to dig deeper and learn more about labeling and the social economy, you can go to the OECD website and search for that. Stay in touch for future OECD podcasts and hope to see you really soon.
To listen to other OECD podcasts, find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud.com/OECD.